Flosstube, Katrina, the crafty catalogger here. Welcome back to my channel if you have been here before, and if you are new, I hope that you find what I'm going to talk about to be interesting. This is my channel where I talk about my crafting adventures, mostly cross stitch, but I also do some knitting, some card making, and some quilting, and I like to read. So I usually touch on those subjects as well. But today is going to be a different episode. Today is not going to be a normal crafting update. Today is going to be me rambling on about how Flosstube, discovering Flosstube, has changed me as a crafter. I'm hoping some of the rest of you will find this interesting. When I think about how I've changed as a cross-stitcher and a crafter over the last few years after discovering Flosstube, it just kind of boggles my mind. And so I thought I'd like to start a discussion. Hopefully some of you, oh, it's the end of the, I could see something there. It looked like my hair was sticking out, but it's the end of the bookcase. I am hoping some of the rest of you will find it interesting as well. So probably the best thing to do would be to start with a little bit of history. Before I learned to cross stitch, I was doing something called chicken scratch. So I do have one piece of chicken scratch that I had done and in my possession still, and it's old. So I mean, keep that in mind. It's looking, it definitely is showing its age. It was made in the late 80s. Here's a close-up, and see some of these stitches right here have been torn out. There's a close-up of the stitch itself, and this may be called some kind of specialty stitch. I don't know. It's a pillow, it's a cardinal. Chicken scratch is done on gingham fabric, and I got to thinking about this a while back, and I asked my mom if she still had all the pattern books, which I knew she would because my mom doesn't ever get rid of anything. And she did, so I had her send them to me. And a lot of these scream 1980, 1990 type designs, but there are some of them that I think are still very pretty, and although I probably wouldn't put them on a pillow anymore, I think some of them are things that I could be done still and not be totally outdated. For instance, this one right here, this navy blue and white, I think is it's just a geometric design, so it's very pretty. Some of the things in some of these books, some of these books just, scream 1980, 1990. This one has a lot of, there's a cow and a pig and a horse in that one. Here's one that's literally a chicken. Oh, there's a cute, where'd he go? There's a cute, like, calico patchwork cat. It's not showing up very well. I'm in a different location today, honestly, because I'm too lazy to drag all this stuff out to the dining room, and I have limited time to get this done, so I just set up where the majority of the stuff was. So anyway, I did chicken scratch a lot in high school. My mom and I were very into it. We did a lot of it, and it's probably not considered, it's not considered cross stitches, it's not X's, but it is some kind of needlework, and we did that for a long time. Then I went off to college, and I honestly don't remember if I was really doing anything the first few years of college in terms of that. I don't remember. But while in college, probably about my third, maybe even my fourth year, one of my roommates and good friends taught myself and another one of my roommates to cross stitch. She was very into it, and so she taught us to cross stitch. And I actually have the very first cross stitch piece I ever created. It says, "I like you just the way you are," and it's a little frog. I believe this was some kind of kit. I don't know that for a fact, but the reason I think that is because I think she gave me everything, including the threads. And if you look at the frog very closely, if it'll focus, the frog is two different colors, and I do remember running out of floss and having to go to the store and try to match up the color on the frog. So I made that, and I gave it to my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, and so that's why it's still in my possession. So from that point forward, I have always cross-stitched. And I would say that I've cross-stitched relatively steadily. And by steadily, I mean I would go 2 or 3 months where I would cross-stitch every night after dinner for a while, and then maybe life would happen and I would have something come up where I couldn't cross-stitch, and then I wouldn't touch it for a couple of months, but then I would come back to it. I never went more than a couple, 2-3 months of not doing cross-stitch. I never went years at a time. I always had a project going that I always seemed to come back to within a relatively short period of time. And I do know that in the 2000s, the early 2000s, I did a lot more card making. My sister-in-law got me into Stampin' Up, and we did a lot of card making during that time, but I always even had a project going then, and that would have been when my children were little. But that is probably one of the major changes that I note from having found Flosstube. I pretty much cross stitch almost every day now. Not quite, especially right now, because my work schedule just doesn't allow it. But I don't even ever go 2 months without touching it. So that's one change, and a good one. So as I think back over the years that I've enjoyed this hobby, I can see many different changes in the way I go about the hobby, in the way I deal with the stuff, all the stuff I have, and I can attribute it directly to Flosstube. And I always thought I knew a fair bit about cross stitch, and then after I discovered Flosstube, I realized I really knew very little. So again, I just wanted to ramble on about it for a little bit and share with you how I've evolved as a stitcher and a crafter, and I would love to have people comment and tell me if they've experienced similar changes, and maybe if you're a video maker, make a video and talk about this topic as well. So I talked about how I got started into cross stitch. First was chicken scratch, then a roommate taught me in college, and then I discovered Flosstube. Well, how did I discover Flosstube? I wasn't really a YouTube watcher, so it wasn't that way, but I know exactly who to blame for it, and I blame her in a good way. Her name is Margaret, and Margaret has a blog called Creative Madness Mama, and I will try to remember to link all of this stuff in the description box below. Margaret's blog, I stumbled upon Margaret's blog years and years and years ago. I would have to say in the early 2000s. And at the time, she was very heavily into reviewing books that were Christian historical fiction, which, as many of you know, is one of my favorite genres. And so I followed Margaret's blog for years and years. And then one day on her blog, she posted, I think, a picture of a quilt she was working on. And I was like, "You quilt? How did I not know this about you? We have this in common also." And then a while later, she posts a picture of some cross stitch. And I'm like, wait a minute, you cross stitch too? I didn't know we had so much in common. So anyway, then I started paying even more attention to her blog because, you know, now not only did she have books that I liked, she had quilting and she had cross stitch. And then one day on her blog, she posts the following question. Her question was, to Flosstube or not to Flosstube? I was very confused. What was Flosstube? I thought, is that a new way to store your floss? What is that? So I asked, I said, Margaret, what is Flosstube? And that led me down the rabbit hole where we are today. I believe the first person that I watched, and I know that I binge watched, was Pam from Pam's Crafty Corner, and I still love her videos today. And I watched several people, Carolyn Mazzio, who unfortunately does not make videos anymore. And I found several people. I watched a few, and I remember at the time thinking, oh, yeah, I'm only going to subscribe to one or two because this could get out of hand really fast. This could be bad. And, well, almost 100 subscriptions later. No regrets. I love watching everybody. I love watching what everybody's doing and getting new ideas. So I'm glad I didn't stick to my original thought that I should only subscribe to one or two channels. Margaret has done a couple of videos, but they were a while ago, and I'm not sure that she decided to go that route. She is active, very active on Instagram. And she actually has two Instagram accounts. One is Cherry Blossom MJ. Again, I will try to be sure to link it below. And the other one is stitching.mj. And I asked her yesterday if it was okay to share those and if she wanted me to share perhaps only one of them. But she said she didn't mind me sharing both of them. Just her Cherry Blossom MJ is everything. That's life. She's a homeschooler, so there's a lot of homeschooling stuff there, her crafting, all that kind of stuff. Her Stitching MJ account is where she's trying to filter it down to just her crafting stuff. So if all you're interested in is crafting stuff, I would head over to the Stitching MJ account. But she does some beautiful work. She loves the Nora Corbett, I think maybe. Mirabilias. She does a lot of the fancy ladies, and they're just gorgeous. No, that's not who. It's Joan Elliott she likes. Maybe she likes them both. I don't know. But she does some really great stuff, so go check her out. So, how has my stitching changed since Margaret introduced me to Flosstube? Well, here are the things that I'd like to talk about. Shopping, the number of whips and the time I spend on cross stitch, my fluff storage, fabrics, whip storage, Q stamps versus and scroll rods versus stitching in hand, sewing method versus two-handed stitching, needle minders, paper patterns versus digital, Facebook groups, and other hobbies. So we'll just start right in. Shopping. I have been racking my brain, and I cannot for the life of me figure out where I was buying stuff back when I was doing chicken scratch and when I first started into cross stitch, because I wasn't buying kits. I have done very few dimensions kits in my crafting career. I must have been buying stuff at Joann's. Perhaps at one time they had more individual patterns. I do know that I must have known there were stores out there, and I must have gone to one occasionally, but I can't tell you where it was or anything like that, which is kind of disconcerting. After my husband and I got married and we moved to mid-Michigan, there was a store in St. Louis, Michigan for a short while after we moved here to this area, and I do remember going there from time to time, but that store wasn't there that long. It was only there a couple of years after we moved here. She closed it, and then later I had heard that she had been sick, and I believe she had cancer and she passed away. So that store wasn't around. Then I discovered what I would now consider probably the closest thing I have to an LNS, local needlework store. Stitch in Time. Some people would call that Saginaw. I would call it Shields because it's technically in the little village of Shields, but Shields is like a suburb of Saginaw. So, and that's about an hour, a little over an hour, hour and a half drive from my house. So it's not exactly local. The funny thing is that I didn't discover that store until several years after we had been married and lived here. We live, as I've said, in the middle of the mitten. My husband and I are both from the base of the thumb, so we go, you know, straight across here to get back home to see family. And it was in one of our trips to go home that I saw this pink awning that they have on the front of their store that's a cross stitch, and I was like, there's a cross stitch store right there, which of course he didn't stop, but later I did check it out, and now I try to go in there whenever I have a chance. It doesn't always work out when I'm going to be in Saginaw that they're open. They kind of have some different hours. So, you know, I stop in when I can. It's a very nice little store, packed full of stuff. And I have learned that they are very good about, if I have something I want, I can call over there, and the owner's name is escaping me right now. I believe it starts with a C. She's very good anyway about, you know, ordering me things or pulling together a package of stuff and mailing it to me, and, you know, I can give her my credit card over the phone. So I do try to support her as much as possible. But one of the things that Flosstube taught me was that I could buy stuff on the internet. It never even crossed my mind to look for cross-stitch stores on the internet. And so, of course, now I do visit Etsy quite frequently, and I get stuff from 123 Stitch if I want something. So anyway, my shopping has changed. And that, of course, just opened up the world of everything, because I didn't even know half of this stuff existed before. So another thing that's changed is the number of whips and the time I spend doing cross-stitching. When I first started, it never even crossed my mind to have more than one project going at a time. The only exception to that rule would have been at Christmas time. I would always have a project going, and probably in about October or November of every year when my children were in elementary school, I would, for about 2 or 3 weeks, have 2 projects going. But it wasn't even really 2 projects going. It was really more like I'm setting my main project aside and I'm going to do this other thing for 3 weeks or whatever. Because when my children were in elementary school, I realized all of a sudden that, oh, we have to do teacher gifts. And I didn't know what to get the teachers. As a school employee myself, I knew they didn't want another mug. They really probably didn't want food. They didn't need more pencils. You know, I knew what teachers got too many things of already and didn't want any more of. So I was trying to make what we gave the boys as teachers be unique. And I decided I would try to do them a cross-stitch piece. And I did find, I will take a picture of my collection of patterns. I forgot to grab them and stick it here. But I did find there are a lot of small education-related patterns out there. A lot of them are by Lizzie Kate, not all of them that I have, but I did find a lot. And so over the years, I would do these patterns. Most of them were about they would fit in a 6x6 frame, so they were great. I could whip them up pretty easily in a matter of a week or two and give them to the teachers. And I was always very careful to mark on my patterns which child gave that design to which teacher which year, because we live in a very, very small school district. Last time I heard, I think we had about 850 students, pre-K 12. So our entire school district is the size of some people's high schools. And so there was always a very good chance that my children would have the same teacher at some point, and they did many times. So I tried to keep very good records of who got what so that the teacher never got the same design twice. And that turned out to be a very good gift. And I've kept those patterns And I sometimes think if I were retired, I would whip up a few and sell them on Etsy for other people to give to their teachers. But I'm not retired, so I can't do that. So anyway, the idea that I could actually work on more than one thing at a time absolutely, positively never crossed my mind. And after watching everyone on Flosstube and realizing that there are a lot of people who have not only 1 or 2 projects going, but maybe even close to 100, I decided maybe I could do that too. And so now I have, I believe at last count, I have about 12. And the other change with that is that of those 12, there are 3 that are large full coverage, and there are a couple that are larger, but not full coverage. Larger than anything I had ever done before, I think. So, you know, the idea that I could do more than one thing at a time, and the also being exposed to all the different designers and all the different types of patterns and styles. I probably stitched a lot of Lizzie Kate before I found Flosstube, and I love Lizzie Kate, but you know, I had never heard of Blackbird Designs and Country Cottage Needleworks, and I had never heard of a lot of these places. So Flosstube just really opened up a whole new world in that regards. And the amount of time I spend stitching, like I said before, I used to be pretty steady, but I would go through spurts where I wouldn't do anything. And now I am pretty much almost every day. I mean, I got home from work at 9 o'clock last night, and I still sat down and I stitched for probably 45 minutes or so. I have found that it's just a great way for me to relax, and I enjoy it. So I try to get in a little bit as often as possible. The other thing that I've noticed is that I would have never thought about taking my stitching, you know, the cat's down here chewing on stuff. I would have never thought about taking my stitching with me anywhere. I would have never considered taking it on vacation or taking it with me when I went camping. And now that's pretty much the first thing I plan when I'm packing. So, oops, sorry, that was the kitty. So one of the biggest areas that has changed would be my floss storage. When I first started cross stitching, I bobbinated all my floss, and I had the plastic box with all the little compartments, and I had a couple of them actually, and then I think I even had a smaller one that I would use for small projects. And I just didn't even know any better, and so that was what I did. And then after discovering Flosstube, I heard people talking about floss away bags, and I did try for a while to do the floss away bag thing. And again, I was going to grab this and I forgot to, so I'll insert a picture here. What I did was I put all of my floss in floss away bags. I didn't buy actual floss away bags. I used snack bags, generic brand snack bags. And I had them in this, this is a box intended to hold photos. This box came with 10 or 12 smaller boxes inside, and you were supposed to put your photos in it and then put those photos in the smaller boxes, put the smaller boxes in the big box, and store all your photos. I took those smaller boxes out and put my floss away bags in there. It worked okay, but after a while I realized that that was not the system for me. I like everything to be neat and tidy. Sorry, the cat is over here and she's trying to get under the sheet that I have laying on top of the bed, and she's kind of amusing. They were slippery, they slid all over, it just kind of drove me nuts. So I ended up changing to what I have now, my current system, which I really love and I think I'm going to stick with forever and ever, although I would like to update it at some point. I had seen something similar to this on Flosstube and in some various internet searches, and I've modified it a bit to make it my own, but I have two of these large, I say large, it's a good sized box. So this master set, as I call it, is not complete. I continually pick away at adding to it. I'm just missing things here and there, but this box is basically a hanging file folder box. I purchased mine at Staples, so I'm imagining they're available at any office supply store. And as I said, I have two of them, and I have two of them because I like to be able to have them spread out. I don't want it to be so tight in here that I can't move them aside and stick the new stick the one that needs to go in there, or to be able to pull it out. I like to be able to pull it out without grabbing things on either side. So basically then what I did, and it looks kind of sloppy, but it's really not. They're not tangled. So it's really a pretty neat system overall. I took the hanging file folders that I had and I cut them off, and then I used my hole punch and I hole punched. I figured out how many I could put on there, and then I just wrote the DMC numbers, and they're all on there. This is not, I gotta set this down, I don't want to drop it. See if I can get that to focus. Maybe, maybe not. Those are DMC numbers, even though you can't tell. And then I use these book rings, and I just put these on there, and I just hang the floss on it. And you can see that I do have some full skeins. Like, I've purchased a full skein of this, and I haven't had to use it yet, so I just have it on there. I just looped the book ring through there. But if I have opened up, or if I have started the skein, then I just loop it over the book ring, like you would see maybe like some of the fancy flosses you buy are looped over a cardboard. I just have them looped over like that. So I can do the stick my needle in and pull one string out at a time. I can do that on there if I want to. In my last video, I said I had an idea for Kelly Stodola of That's So Kelly Co. And I'm sure that Kelly Stodola doesn't watch me at all. But one of these days, I'm going to get up the nerve to email her and say, I have this idea. I'd like you to try and make this for me. I would love for her to make this piece for me out of the plastic that she makes her Bitsy Keeps out of. Somehow make a piece of plastic. Like, I can repurpose this piece of metal. Like, if she would just make this part with the holes in it and maybe pre-printed, have the numbers on it, because this is not going to be great over time. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to do something, because I can tell that at some point I'm going to accidentally yank on something too hard and I'm going to rip a hole, or rip one of these holes, and then I'll have to redo the whole thing. I would like a nice, pretty plastic thing where I could take my metal thing out, slide it into the end of the plastic thing, and have that in there. So if Kelly ever does see this, or if anybody knows Kelly and wants to pass that idea on to her, I would totally buy that from her if she would make that. So I really like this as my master system. And basically what I do then when I start a new project, I will, go into this box. You can see that here I have 435, and I have a lot of 435. And I just pull off a bunch and put it in with my project. Now here's my trick for how I get it on here. So these are all basically pre-cut lengths if they're like this. If they're on the ring with the knot in the end, it's not really a knot, but the loop in the end, they are already pre-cut. And what I do is I take my skein, and I have an older wooden ruler that I determined that I really like the length of, and I hold the end of my skein at the end of the ruler, and I wrap it the long way around my ruler. So so you end up with a 24-inch length, because then when I'm done, I take it off the ruler and I hold it at the top so that my two ends are dangling at the end, and I try to make it so that my two ends are roughly even, and then I cut at the bottom where those two ends are. So now I have a whole bunch of ends, and then I have this whole hank of pre-cut, and then I put them on the rings. The other thing you can see is I do still have some of my stuff on bobbins, and if it was still on bobbins, I just stuck it on there, and when I ever need that color again, I will unbobbinate it and stick it where, you know, on there normal. But in the act of getting everything into the system, if it was on a bobbin, I just stuck it on there. 1 second, I have to take this thing away from the cat. She's in a chewing phase. So that's how I'm now doing my master set. And then when it came to floss storage for my actual projects, I have gone to, for the most part, these floss cards. Very similar concept. You know, they're looped onto the card. So again, I can use my needle and I can pull out one strand at a time, and I can just loop things back on there when I'm, you know, if I have a chunk that's big enough to use again. Next time I need that color, I can stick it back on there easily. And so most of my, I do have some projects, I have 2 of these in them because, you know, I need to. These cards came from Hobby Lobby. They do have a space on the back side for you to write the name of your project. I don't ever do that. And I have gone to writing. I'm not sure why I can't get that to focus today. I do write the number, and this is a, so you can see I have the symbol and the number. This happens to be a Mill Hill kit, so actually it's not a number, it's just a name. So most of my projects, I have these cards in them, and I just reuse them until I rip one and then I have to give it up. So I have gone to that for most of my projects. I do have one project that's still using floss away bags, and that is my Glory of Autumn by Dimensions. And that might be the only time I would ever do that again, is if I were doing a kit like that, because they come with those on those strips, and I'm not sure how you would ever put it on the card. I mean, I suppose you could put it on the card. So anyway, I really do like this card system because I can easily pull off what I need very quickly, and I can also very easily put some back. So I'm not spending a lot of time winding things onto bobbins. Then for my 3 large full coverage pieces, I have, this is my system for those. So these, I have 3 of these boxes. They are, I believe they're the Sterlite brand. I don't know what brand they're. I'm pretty sure I got them either at Walmart or the dollar store. They're shoebox size, and I have taken a picture of the project and used contact paper and put it on the top, so I always know which project this box goes with. And inside these boxes, I have these Paco organizers, which are similar in concept to the cards. you just loop your floss over this little thing and down through these foam things. But again, I can use my needle and I can pull out just 1 or 2 pieces. And again, when I'm finished, I can loop any extra that I have left over back on here. Both, or all 3 of my full coverage projects did require me to have 2 of these for each one. They are kind of expensive. I want to say they're $20-ish a piece. I did get some for Christmas, so but I think that it was a worthwhile investment because obviously they're very reusable. They come with, they come with a card, which of course when I want to take it out, I can't get it out. They come with this card, which actually you can see the back side. It's double-sided, so you can flip it over and use it again. The instructions tell you to write your symbol, to draw your symbol in that little box. And I did try that when I first started using these. And that's just not the way my brain works. I spent a whole lot of time staring, looking for the symbol, and I thought, this is just madness. Just put the number there, because I know what number it is. So I have the DMC numbers, and they're in order, you know, numerically. They go like here, this way, and then around this way. And it's just very easy for me to do that. So I really like these pack organizers. And like I said, I can fit 2 of these, and I could fit a 3rd one in there. If I needed a 3rd one for a project, I could easily fit a 3rd one in there. So that is how I am storing my floss for those projects. And that has been a game changer because I was spending an awful lot of time winding and unwinding bobbins, especially for those large projects. So that's one of the biggest ways that Flosstube has changed my stitching, because I discovered that I don't have to use bobbins. Flosstube introduced me to different fabrics. The only fabrics I ever knew about were Aida. And then I did know about linen and even weaves, but I didn't know there was such a thing as hand-dyed, over-dyed fabrics. I mean, I knew you could get white and off-white, and then there's that one, I think it's called Fiddler's Cloth. It's like, it almost looks like I would call it oatmeal. And then I knew that sometimes you could get Charles Craft in like a brown or a blue, but these hand-dyed, multicolored fabrics, I had never seen anything like that before. And I had never seen the stuff with the sparklies on it. This looks really pretty. So again, another thing that Flosstube has introduced me to. And now not only have I purchased some hand-dyed, I've even tried my hand at dyeing a piece of my own. Whip storage, when you only have one whip, you really don't have much storage. So this was a big change. For the most part, you know, I just used to leave it sitting on the end table in the living room. And then when I started having more than one, I kind of had to come up with a system. I really love the project bags that a lot of people sell and buy. They are gorgeous, but in the long run, I did buy a couple. They've turned into knitting bags because they just don't seem to work as well for me in my organizational scheme. But what I think Christine at Stitch All the Things introduced us all to these. They're a plastic mesh kind of bag. I have that stuck inside because the cat likes to play with these ends. They're probably about 9 by 12-ish. I can fit an 8.5 by 11. Like, I can fit the pattern in here. Like this one I have a Q-snap, the pattern, the floss. I have everything in here, and I can still zip it shut. That's my Teresa Kogut. And so they work very nicely. and they fit perfectly in this basket. I don't remember where I got this basket. I've had it for years and years and years. And this basket fits perfectly on the bottom shelf of the end table that sits next to my stitchy chair. And I will insert a picture of my stitchy spot right here, so you can see that I have a very small table on one side that has a basket full of miscellaneous garbage. You know, a pencil cup with various pencils and things to mark things with. My Kindle Fire sits there. My cheater glasses are in that basket. I'm looking to see what else is in there. Just kind of odds and ends that I use regularly when I'm stitching, so I like to have handy, but I try to keep them corralled in that little basket. Then on the other side, I have a larger end table that used to be in our living room, but is no longer, obviously. And this basket sits on the bottom shelf of that, fits perfectly. So that has all my whips in it. And then next to that, up against the wall, are some of my larger projects. Then over on the other side on the floor, you can see my large stand with a project sitting on it. I do try to keep everything as contained as possible. It's just the way I like it. I also don't ever want my family to feel like I'm cluttering up the entire house with my crafting stuff. They have never said anything negative about my crafting, and they all, sorry, dropped it. And they're supportive, you know. The big joke in this house is Mom's playing with her threads again, which I guess applies to almost all my hobbies, so that's fine. But I just like to keep it contained. So for the most part, most of my stitchy stuff is right in that corner, except for my fabric and my patterns are in the office, but they're both in two containers. And if you were to walk in there, you wouldn't even know that was what was in there. Another very big way that Flosstube has changed me as a stitcher. When I first started stitching, I was stitching in hand using the sewing method. At the time, I did not know that's what that was called. And so I learned that terminology after I found Flosstube. But now I can't stitch in hand. I tried a couple months ago and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so basically everything I work on is in either a Q-snap or on scroll rods. I still don't like hoops. I don't know, something about the round. I prefer the square over the round, I guess. And I actually have also taught myself to two-hand stitch. And this was actually a change that probably made it so I can continue to cross stitch for several more years, I hope. Because I was noticing when I was stitching in hand and using the sewing method, I would notice that my ring finger on my right hand would go numb like every time I stitched. My guess is that I have some early signs of carpal tunnel happening, and however I was holding my needle to do that was causing the numbness. And once I taught myself to two-hand stitch and I started using the frames, the Q-snaps or the scroll frames, and I started two-handing stitching, that has stopped. So I probably wouldn't even try to force myself to go back to stitching in hand at this point, knowing that I'm pretty sure that would happen again. And if stitching this other way makes it so I can actually do it without my hand going numb, that's good. Needle minders, I had never heard of a needle minder before. And now I have quite a collection, most of which though I have bought a few, but I actually try to make my own whenever I can. And not because I'm cheap. Well, I am cheap, but one day I went through my jewelry box and I thought, why is all this stuff sitting in my jewelry box? I'm never going to use it. And so like, here's an example of a needle minder. I'm hoping. It's very hard to see, but this particular piece is a hand-painted. It's actually kind of hard to see in real life, so I don't know why I think that camera's going to pick it up. It's a hand-painted scene, and this is from Russia. My mother used to be in a choir, a large choir, and they took a couple of very large trips. A couple times they went to the Holy Lands, and then one time they went to Russia. And that was one of the things she brought me back from Russia was, it was a pin, like to wear on your shirt. And there was a time in my early 20s when I probably did wear pins a lot, but I don't wear pins anymore. I wear scarves a lot, but I don't wear pins. And so I have that. I have 2 or 3 pieces that came out of my jewelry box that I looked at and I thought, I'm not going to ever wear that again. And so I bought magnets and I turned them into magnets. And this is my latest one that I bought this a couple weeks ago when I was in Tawas. And I found this Michigan magnet, which I thought was really cute, but it's wood and it's flat. So I thought that'll be a great needle minder. Forget putting it on my fridge. I'm going to put that on my cross stitch. So I do have a couple of blingy ones. I have a blingy, if it weren't buried right now, I would pull it out and show you. But you may have seen it. It's on one of my large projects. It's a blingy Grinch. And I bought that because my husband loves the Grinch. And so, paper patterns versus digital. I mean, wait, I can read my pattern on my iPad. I can enlarge it so I can see it. I can search for a symbol and then mark off what I've done. Game changer. That was like the best thing ever when I discovered that. And at first I used a program on my iPad, and I honestly can't even remember the name of it now because I've stopped using it because Pattern Keeper came out, and Pattern Keeper is the best. And so I'm to the point now where I pretty much, even if I have a paper pattern, I will attempt to get it into PDF format enough to use it in Pattern Keeper if I can. I will still use a pattern. I will still use a paper pattern if I have to. But I definitely prefer using a digital pattern and having the searching capabilities and such. And I ended up buying a Kindle Fire just for that purpose. So I got a really good deal though. Like I traded in an old iPad and had a coupon, and I didn't pay a whole lot of money for that Kindle Fire, but it was worth every penny I paid for it. Facebook groups. I'm an information professional, but the thought of searching Facebook for cross stitch had never crossed my mind until I discovered Flosstube, and everybody's talking about Stitch Mania and all these other things. And now I am in several groups, and I'm trying to be active in a couple of them. I'm failing miserably, but that's just because, you know, that's the way life is right now. I just don't have a whole lot of time. And that's okay. It will get better someday. Paige, no. No. She really does like to chew on things. And then lastly, Flosstube has enabled me and encouraged me to take up other crafts. So now I consider myself a knitter as well. I consider myself somewhat of a quilter, but I didn't really come to that through Flosstube. I actually came to the quilting more because my mother handed me down she bought a new sewing machine. She gave me her old one. And I thought, well, I should learn to use this thing if I'm going to have it. And my mom was getting really into quilting, and she is really into quilting. So I thought it would be something we could kind of do together, even though we don't live anywhere near each other. So together is not really a thing. But so yeah, Flosstube has definitely changed me as a crafter, and definitely for the better. But I would really be interested to hear your story. Do you think that you have changed dramatically as a stitcher or a crafter because of watching Flosstube? I know I have also made a lot of friends that I would have never met or talked to. And that has been great because in my day-to-day life, I don't have anyone really who cross stitches, or no one who is as excited about crafting as I am. And even though like my best friend does cross stitch and we will talk cross stitch once in a while, the conversation is not very long because I don't know, she just doesn't have the same level. She doesn't watch Flosstube. Probably if she would start watching Flosstube, she would get to my level. But we don't have the same level of excitement about it. So although we do talk about it, it's not the same as when I can chat with some of you. And so again, I thank Flosstube for that. So I have rambled on for way longer than I should have about a topic that maybe nobody else cares about. But as I was thinking about it, I just really thought, wow, who would have thunk that checking out a few YouTube videos would really explode my crafting into what it has become today. Oh, the other thing I didn't talk about was now I have a couple of frames. Oh, I even brought one over here. And I don't stitch without if I have to stitch without these, I'm like a contortionist in the chair trying to figure out how to hold my stuff. I have this one, a Kay's Creation. I think this is a Z something frame. This is a lap frame, sits right on my lap. I love it. And then I will take a picture and insert it of the other one because I really can't hold it up very well. It holds my scroll rods and I love it. I actually don't think you can buy one anymore. I kind of looked a while back and I think maybe the guy isn't making them anymore. If I remember correctly, he was going to school and he did this like on the side, because I remember having to wait, and I had a notification on my Facebook like when these people post that they're going to have these for sale, I wanted to know. And because they would post when he was going to make some and you could try to get one, and I did get one and I love it. The only problem with that frame is it's one that you put the two legs under your thighs while you're sitting in your chair. So once I'm sitting, I don't like to get up for a while. It's just cumbersome. So there's a little part of me that kind of thinks every once in a while about saying to my husband, I'd really like a Lowry frame for Christmas. And I may at some point, because I mean that from what I can see, you can just swing that out of your way and get out of your chair. So at some point I may invest in one of those, but again, never had any of that kind of stuff before Flosstube. Anyway, friends, it's been nice rambling at you today, and I do hope that I didn't bore you too much. And if you made it this far, I hope that you will comment below and tell me about any ways that Flosstube has impacted your stitching, and look for me to be back in a couple of weeks with my September, October-ish, mostly September update. I do have it on my calendar already, so I know when I'm going to try to film that update. And until then, happy stitching.